Doing a PhD, even if you have no other major commitments on your time and you're just working on the PhD full time, is quite a daunting and demanding task. So, what can you do if that's not the case and you have other demands on your time, whether that's part time work or something else which is demanding your attention? Now, one of the reasons why it's so difficult to balance PhD work with these other demands is that the consequences of your actions with regards to your PhD on a daily basis are generally speaking not that great in comparison to other work. So if you don't do anything on your PhD today, if you don't do any work at all, probably there'll be no major consequences. Likewise, if you have an amazingly productive PhD workday and you do everything that you plan to do, again, it won't have that much positive effect because it's such a tiny fraction of everything that you need to do. So because there aren't many consequences to either positive or negative consequences to either not doing anything or having an amazingly productive day, it's really, really easy for the other demands on your time to push the PhD completely out of the way. Because if you have some paid work, for example, if you don't do that at the time when it's due, then very quickly you will lose that paid work. There are immediate or medium-term consequences to your decisions. So what tends to happen is the PhD gets completely pushed out of the way on a regular basis, and that trains the habit of deferring the PhD work. So then maybe when you do have some free time, it's really difficult to get back into it because you've not been engaging with it and you've, again, developed that habit of putting things off. So I think it's extremely important to maintain contact with your PhD on a regular basis and set aside some time every single week and protect that time as a non-negotiable commitment. And what I mean by that is treating the PhD with a higher level of priority so that it can compete with those other tasks during that set time. So if somebody says to you, can you produce this report for me on Monday? And Monday is your PhD day, then you have to say, no, I'm not available during that time, and then fit the other work around it. You've got to make that PhD time a non-negotiable commitment. As soon as you start moving it, putting it off to fit the other things in, then that is the habit that you're going to develop, and it's always going to lose that particular battle. So you've got to get into the habit of setting that time and telling people that you're not available. Now you can do this because you probably do it with other things in your life. So if there was a medical emergency, for example, and then someone was emailing you and saying, can you do this on Monday? You would say, no, I'm not available. I have to go to the hospital because of whatever reason. Or if you were sick, or if you had a doctor's appointment or something else, if you were moving house, whatever it is, people generally do this from time to time in terms of setting a priority and then fitting other things around it. So you have to apply that to the PhD. Otherwise, there is simply no way that it can compete with those other demands on your time. Now, sometimes people are worried about this. They're worried about how people will react. But if you always say yes to everything, then they will expect you to continue to do that. They will always trample over any boundaries that you set because they're used to getting you to do whatever they want at whatever time because you always say yes. But if you start saying no to things, or rather saying, I'm sorry, I can't do it at that particular time, but is it okay if I do that for you on Wednesday? Generally speaking, people will adapt and they will respect your time a lot more. They will give you more notice to do things because they know that they can't just drop things on you at the last minute. Now, if people react badly to this, if they say, well, you need to do this, work needs to be your priority, then you have a decision to make. Because if that continues, if you simply cannot set those boundaries, or people will not allow you to set those boundaries, or they don't respect those boundaries, then you have a decision to make about which is the greater priority for you. Is it more important that you keep that job or that specific job, or is it more important than that you get the PhD? If the PhD is more important to you than that job, then switch jobs. Find a job where you have a little bit more flexibility in terms of your hours. Otherwise, it is simply not going to happen. And it might be a difficult choice to make, but this is the choice that you have to make. You cannot simply stay in the same situation and expect things to change. Now, sometimes, of course, it is a little bit more complicated because your part-time work might be for the university where you're trying to get your PhD. So you might be doing teaching assistant work, you might be producing reports for your supervisor, those kind of things. In that case, maybe instead of completely quitting that work, perhaps renegotiating some of your commitments. I see this all the time with PhD students who feel that they cannot say no to anything that they're asked to do by their supervisor. But then what happens is they lose years and years and years of their time. And the whole reason why they're doing this part-time work is to stay in the institution and get the PhD, but then they're not able to do the PhD. And so it's just doing work for the sake of doing work. So saying clearly and openly to your supervisor or whoever else you're working with, I need to start prioritizing the PhD work. At the moment, I cannot take on this amount of teaching from next semester. Would it be possible to do one less course, for example, to free up some time? So renegotiating some of those commitments, starting to say no to some things, there will be other people who can take on a lot of that work. Again, if people don't respect those boundaries or they just keep piling on more and more work, then you have to make a decision. Is it actually possible to put in the hours which are required to do your PhD? In some cases, there are supervisors who simply want people to do free administrative work for them, and they want to keep the students back as long as possible to keep them doing that. So they're not working in the interests of their students. That's a difficult situation to be in. And again, you have to make decisions about whether that path is actually going to lead you to ever completing your PhD, and possibly make some difficult decisions. So sometimes in that case, it's complicated. It can be political. There can be all sorts of other things going on. But starting to set some boundaries and negotiating some of those commitments instead of saying yes to everything is a really important step. So I'm very aware there can be a lot of complications, but whatever the situation is, you need to have some ring-fenced, protected time that you dedicate to the PhD. And if that's not possible, then you may have some difficult decisions to make. But do not expect that it's all going to somehow change unless you start changing some of the decisions that you make on a daily and weekly basis. So if you have any comments on this, or if there are any particular situations that you're dealing with, please do comment below and I'll do my best to help out. If you want more tips or if you want to know more about what I do, check out my websites. There are two of them. There's jameshaytonphd.com, where I have hundreds of blog posts on all things PhD related, and also the PhD Academy, where we have a little bit more detailed guidance. We've got recorded courses, a forum. We also do weekly Zoom calls, and we have a whole community of PhD students as well. I'll put links to both of those websites in the description below. That's it from me. Best of luck and see you next time.